I wanted to eat. Fuck. Not because I was hungry in the traditional sense, the dull ache of an empty stomach. That would have been simple. That would have been an easy fix, a burger joint, a pizza slice folded in a paper plate, anything. No, this was a different kind of hunger. It was a craving of the soul, a phantom limb of a memory, demanding to be fed. I was missing that specific taste, a flavor I couldn't name, a ghost on my tongue. And of course, I didn't know which one. It was a maddening, exquisite torture. The only thing I knew for sure was that the dish, whatever it turned out to be, had to be really, truly good. It had to be perfect. So go and eat at your favorite little restaurant. That's the obvious answer. The one my brain offered up like a tired, helpful assistant. The little Italian place on the corner, with the checkered tablecloths, and the owner who calls you amico. No, not tonight. The thought of its comfortable predictability felt like a betrayal of the quest. I didn't feel like my favorite today. I wanted to go somewhere I hadn't been, where something would surprise me, jolt me out of this strange, melancholic stasis. The problem, of course, is that surprises can be unpleasant. A bad meal on a night like this wouldn't just be a disappointment. It would be a catastrophe, a confirmation of the universe's indifference. To hell with it. Risk was the only real spice left. I also wanted a drink and sex. Let's be honest with ourselves here. Intimacy, a body to hold onto in the dark, so you don't feel like you're spinning off the planet. A warmth to press against the gnawing cold inside. So call up some girl you know. The helpful assistant in my head chirped again, ever the pragmatist. Take her to a restaurant, eat, get drunk, and fuck. Make love with her to your heart's content. Logical. Entirely. It's the playbook for a man on a lonely Tuesday night. But my desires were at war with each other. I wanted to drink alone, not with a girl, not with a friend, but utterly, completely alone. I wanted the sacred solitude of a man at a bar, a silent communion with a glass of amber liquid. I couldn't bear the thought of performing tonight. No feigned interest in someone's day, no carefully curated anecdotes. I didn't want anyone to see the expression on my face. The one I knew was there, the look of a man searching for a door in a solid wall. I didn't want them asking what's wrong. Or, worse, peering into my soul with well-meaning eyes and finding it empty. I was circling the night city in my car, a shark in a steel cage, the glow of traffic lights washing over me in waves of red and green. Annoyed by my own confused indecisiveness, I felt a surge of self-loathing. What kind of man doesn't know what he wants? I drove past glowing storefronts, past crowds of laughing people spilling out of bars, each of them seeming to possess a certainty that I lacked. They knew where they were going. They knew who they were meeting. Their hunger was simple. Then, like a forgotten dream surfacing, I remembered. A flash of a memory from a few weeks back, driving out of the city for a pointless meeting. A little restaurant I had seen on the highway, set back from the road, looking like it had been there for 100 years. It was an island in a sea of asphalt and darkness. I hadn't thought about it since, but now, the image returned with the force of a premonition. It felt right. It felt like the answer. Without another thought, I broke from the city's slow, circulatory system, swung the car onto the on-ramp, and hit the gas. The engine roared, and the city lights dissolved into streaks in my rearview mirror. I was speeding toward the unknown, and for the first time all night, I felt a flicker of hope. The restaurant was called The Half. The sign was simple, carved into a piece of dark wood. I parked on the gravel lot, the crunch under the tires, the only sound besides the distant hum of the highway. Large windows glowed with a warm, inviting light, and through them, I could see the silhouette of a massive stone fireplace. Above, a sliver of a bright moon hung in the inky sky, scratch, or a pane of glass. Wooden walls, a fireplace, a view of the moon. It was just what you need on a gloomy evening. It was a sanctuary. I pushed open the heavy oak door and was greeted by the scent of wood smoke, roasting meat, and something else. Something clean and old, like beeswax and thyme. It was quiet inside. A few scattered patrons, a young couple holding hands across a small table, an older man reading a book by the fire, all cocooned in their own private worlds. No loud music, just the crackle of the fire and the low murmur of conversation. Hostess led me to a small table for one by the window. It felt perfect. The menu was simple, bound in leather. My eyes scanned the pages. I thought about ordering a red Georgian wine, something bold and earthy, and the salmon steak, elegant and familiar. It was a safe choice, a good choice, but my gaze snagged onto items, listed almost as an afterthought at the bottom of a page. A simple chicken breast, described only as pan-fried with hard spices, and a list of whiskies. My finger stopped on a name I hadn't heard before, a Scotch from an island I couldn't place. Something inside me, the same impulsive navigator that had sent me hurtling down the highway, made the decision for me. "I'll have the chicken breast," I told the waitress. "And a double of the Kilkerran, neat," she nodded, a slight, knowing smile on her face, as if I'd passed a small test. When the whiskey arrived, it was the color of dark honey. I raised the glass, inhaled the aroma, peat smoke, sea salt, and a strange, sweet note like dried fruit. I took a sip. It was a revelation. It wasn't the aggressive, medicinal smoke of its Islay cousins. This was different. It had a rich, playful taste that danced on the tongue, a burst of brine, then a wave of warm caramel and oak, followed by a lingering, spicy finish that felt like a story unfolding. It was complex and surprising and utterly magnificent. I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring it. This was a good start. The chicken arrived not long after, resting on a bed of roasted root vegetables. It looked deceptively simple, but the aroma was intoxicating. The skin was a perfect golden brown, glistening and crisp, dusted with a constellation of dark, fragrant spices I couldn't identify. I cut into it. It was perfectly cooked, tender and juicy. And the taste, oh, the taste, it was everything I didn't know I was looking for. The spices were a symphony, a bit of smoke from paprika, the piney warmth of rosemary, a hint of garlic, and something else, something exotic and faintly sweet, maybe cardamom or allspice. It was rustic yet refined, simple yet profound. Each bite, followed by a small sip of the complex Scotch, was a moment of pure, unadulterated pleasure. The food and the drink worked their magic. My mood, which had been a tight, grey knot in my chest, began to unfurl. The warmth from the fireplace seeped into my bones, and the warmth from the whiskey spread through my veins. I relaxed. The frantic, searching energy dissipated, replaced by a calm, glowing contentment. Gradually, the pleasure of life, the simple, profound joy of being alive, returned. I looked out the window at the moon, at the dark, rustling trees, and felt a sense of peace settle over me. I could have gone home then. I could have paid the bill, driven back to my empty apartment, and fallen into a contented, dreamless sleep. The hunger, the initial craving, had been satisfied. The evening had been saved. I could even do without sex, but then, I thought, as I savoured the last drop of whiskey, the evening wouldn't be truly perfect. The meal had healed the fracture in my soul, but it had also awakened a different, deeper longing, the desire for connection, for the specific warmth of another person, not just any person, a specific person. Her name was Anna. I left a good tip, more than generous, a small offering of thanks to this temple of serendipity. I stepped out into the cool night air, feeling recharged and resolute. A new plan was forming, as bold and impulsive as the first. I called a taxi and went back to the city, not towards my home, but towards a new destination. The taxi dropped me at a 24-hour gourmet supermarket. Its bright, sterile light, a stark contrast to the mellow glow of the hearth. I walked the aisles with a sense of mission. This wasn't just shopping, it was a ritual. I was curating an experience, I selected a sharp, crystalline wedge of aged Parmesan. I found the imported meats and had them slice paper-thin sheets of Spanish Jamon, the fat marbled through the deep red muscle. I chose a bar of rich, Belgian dark chocolate, 85% cacao, bitter and intense. For the wine, I bypassed the usual suspects and picked out a bottle of dry German Riesling, knowing its crisp acidity and notes of stone fruit would cut perfectly through the salt of the cheese and ham. Then I paused in front of the pharmacy aisle. Condoms, yes, I almost forgot them. The thought was a small, sobering splash of reality in my romantic haze. We're adults, and she's also a doctor. It was a nod to pragmatism, an acknowledgement of the reality of the situation, of the audacious request I was about to make. Only then, with the bag of carefully chosen offerings sitting on the passenger seat of a new taxi, did I call her Anna. We barely knew each other. We'd met through a mutual acquaintance a month ago, a brief conversation at a crowded gallery opening. She was a doctor and a physician, which I found both intimidating and fascinating. She moved with a sense of calm urgency, a stillness in the middle of chaos. I remembered her eyes, a deep, intelligent grey, and the way she had laughed, a genuine, throaty sound, when I'd made a cynical joke about the art. The last time we saw each other, at a friend's dinner party just last week, she had briefly touched my arm when she was making a point. It was an insignificant gesture, one she probably forgot instantly, but to me, it felt like a spark. I had felt a pull, an intuition. I was betting the entire perfection of my evening on that single, fleeting touch. The phone rang 3 times. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, a nervous, syncopated rhythm. What if she didn't answer? What if she told me to get lost? Hello. Her voice was tired, but clear. Anna, it's Mark. A pause. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. Mark, hi, it's late. Is everything okay? Her doctor instincts kicking in immediately. Everything's fine, I said, my own voice sounding steadier than I felt. Actually, it's better than fine. I want to come over. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear her processing the sheer, unmitigated audacity of my request. I held my breath. Now. She finally asked, her tone a mixture of incredulity and, I hoped, a flicker of intrigue. Yes, I said, pushing my chips to the center of the table. I have wine and chocolate. Another pause, shorter this time. I pictured her in her apartment, weighing the strangeness of the call against something else, curiosity, perhaps, or a memory of her own from our last meeting. Then, I heard her take a soft breath. Okay, she said, and my entire body relaxed in a single, sudden rush. Okay, Mark, I'll text you the address. The rest of the taxi ride was a dream. The city lights seemed to blur into a triumphant, glittering river. I wasn't just a lonely man in a car anymore. I was a man with a destination. A man with a bottle of Riesling and a purpose. Her apartment was on the 4th floor of an old building with a beautiful, creaking elevator. Standing outside her door, I felt a final moment of doubt. This was insane. But I knocked anyway. The door opened, and there she was. She was wearing soft-looking grey sweatpants and a simple white t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and her face was free of makeup. She looked tired, yes, but her grey eyes were wide and curious. She wasn't smiling, but there was no hostility in her expression, only a quiet, waiting watchfulness. Hi, I said, holding up the grocery bag like a trophy and a peace offering all in one. Hi, she replied, a small, tentative smile finally touching her lips. She stepped back to let me in. I could have invited her somewhere. We could have had dinner together, after all, but no. As I stepped inside, I knew I had made the right choice. I wanted to be here, in her home, a space saturated with her scents, not antiseptic, as I might have imagined, but something warm and clean, like fresh laundry and old books. Her apartment was neat, but lived in. Bookshelves overflowed onto the floor. A comfortable-looking armchair was draped with a knitted blanket. An abstract prints I didn't recognize hung on the walls. It was her territory, her sanctuary. She took the bag from me, her fingers brushing against mine. And this time the spark was undeniable. We stood in her small kitchen, unpacking the parmesan and the jamin, the chocolate and the wine. The awkwardness began to melt away, replaced by a comfortable, humming silence as we moved around each other. She found a wooden board for the food, and to wine glasses dot, she poured the Riesling, its pale gold catching the light. She handed me a glass, and our eyes met over the rims. She finally asked a question that had been hanging in the air. "So," she said, her voice soft, "what was so much better than fine?" I took a sip of the wine. It was crisp and perfect. I looked at her, at the quiet curiosity in her eyes, at the way the dim light of her kitchen softened the lines of her face. I thought about the gnawing, nameless hunger that had started my night, about the drive, the restaurant, the whiskey, the chicken. I thought about the entire, winding journey that had led me, improbably, to her door dot, and as she stood there waiting for an answer, a genuine, unforced smile spread across my face. I realized the specific taste I had been searching for all night wasn't a flavor to be eaten. It was a feeling. It was the feeling of this exact moment. The risk, the arrival, the shared bottle of wine in a quiet room, the beginning, this, I sighed, raising my glass to her. This is. She held my gaze for a long moment, and then she laughed. It was that same genuine, throaty sound from the gallery, a sound like wind chimes in a quiet room. And in that moment, I knew I had found what I was looking for. I was home.